can just remember it being so dark
Yeah.
and me thinking, oh gosh, this is like so dark. It's 6 a.m.
Yeah.
We're in this pitch black farmyard somewhere. And then suddenly these TV cameras came on and Good Morning Britain were there to try and get this interview with Boris Johnson that he promised to do, but he didn't do. And so he went into the fridge. Also, there was a number 10 aide who was also caught off guard and accidentally swore on TV.
Live on TV.
There's a bit of that story that people don't know, an added bit of how his day got even worse. Sam, time's running out, and what is happening in Parliament?
Well, it's a strange place, Parliament, during an election because MPs are not allowed in the building.
Very empty.
It's really ghostly. But it's also it's a brutal place because signs have gone up in Portcullis House, which is the heart of Parliament. It's where everybody meets. And a big sign has gone up saying, welcome to Parliament. It's all getting ready for the new intake.
And the sign is absolutely ginormous. I mean, it is, my awareness of how many metres something is.
You're no good on spatial awareness.
Well, no, but I don't know if it's 50 metres or 100 metres, but
It's big.
It is absolutely ginormous, this Welcome to Parliament sign. It feels like Freshers' Week's vibes already, and you realise, oh, wow, this is 2 weeks to go, this is about to end, and quite soon we will have a new load of MPs.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting because I'm looking through my phone, my contacts, and who's going to be back, and how many people am I going to still have around to chat to. And it doesn't matter which paper you work for or which organisation, all of a sudden you've got to make a whole load of new contacts and say goodbye to a lot of people you'll never see again.
I always feel quite unlucky that every election you lose people whatever party, you just think, oh, they are good people, they were quite nice to me, they're quite helpful, and then it just feels quite sad.
It's quite brutal.
You never really get to say goodbye, they're just gone, never come back.
On the last day, on the day the election was called, I went for drinks on the terrace, which is where the MPs go to drink, and one gave me a hug and said, I'll probably never see you again. And I thought, wow, this is it, But it doesn't matter which paper you work for, which organisation you work for. You have contacts across the parties, don't you? So it isn't just a case of one party. And even if you are, like for example, the Mirror, you are going to have a lot of new Labour MPs to get to know. As well as a lot of the people who've just naturally kind of come to their end of their time and are standing down voluntarily.
So should we get on with it? I'm John Stevens, political editor of The Mirror.
And I'm Sam Lister, political editor at The Express.
And this is the Divison Bell. So in the final straight of the campaign, the party leaders are going to be travelling all around the country, crisscrossing everywhere. Let's talk about battle buses, which people obviously have seen on TV, but may not know sometimes that can be where romances form between different journalists. There's one married couple in Westminster whose romance started on a battle bus. Battle buses, what are they really like?
Yeah, I'm a battle bus veteran, John. This is my fourth general election going on battle buses. And for two of those, I worked for an organisation where I was essentially the pool reporter. So you're the reporter that is there at everything, so the other reporters don't have to be. That actually can be quite interesting. It can also be quite boring and tedious because you go up and down the motorway over and over.
Their parties say the same thing over and over again to different audiences, and so it's fresh for them, exciting. But
for you, you've heard it 1,000 times. It rattles around your head when you're in your dreams.
And this campaign, you've been on Rishi's bus so far, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I interviewed the Prime Minister on his battle bus. It's quite a swanky one. I think, from memory, it is the same one that was used by Theresa May. So I went on the battle bus to interview the Prime Minister, and we went to Henley, which is obviously a very nice part of the world. The problem with these things is you turn up somewhere, you do your interview, you get back on the bus. You're only ever there for probably 20 minutes, half an hour. While we were in Henley, the Lib Dems pulled off a little bit of a stunt because the Prime Minister was sat having a chat to constituents. on the river. The Lib Dems went past in a boat, shouting things, holding up banners. That's a good kind of coup for the Lib Dems. But this is what happens on battle buses. You kind of get on and off. The people who are on the battle bus, the operations are always trying to keep it top secret to stop people ruining their event. But the opposition parties always find out where you're going. So it's very difficult.
And I've been on the Labour battle bus, which is being taken around the country mostly by Angela Rayner, has kind of commandeered the bus. Went on the maiden voyage. We went around the M25 when it was on the first stretch. And that is obviously a big red bus with change in big letters on the side, which is possibly not surprised. Inside she had the fridge where she had a lettuce.
What's in the fridge?
The fridge, well, in the fridge was lettuce, which looked like the Liz Truss lettuce.
Okay.
So classic joke there.
Hilarious.
And then Keir Starmer's been going around the country. He's got a press bus following him, but he's not had a kind of red branded Labour bus, although he has borrowed it at some points. But we actually were on Boris Johnson's battle bus together in 2019 when, in the final days of the campaign, it was that campaign in December, it was cold, it was the run up to Christmas. We went to everywhere we went, we were there when the JCB went through the wall.
Pie making.
Get Brexit done. Yeah, the pie making where he glazed a pie which said, get Brexit done. We went to, was it a wrapping paper factory in Wales where I can't remember
I don't
that,
know what happened there,
but I'm
but
sure there's a present that said get Brexit done on it. But we were also there for that infamous morning at a dairy. I think it was it Pudsey in West Yorkshire near
Definitely
Leeds.
West Yorkshire, yeah.
And it was early in the morning. I think we got up at like 4 a.m. or something. It was pitch black.
Freezing cold.
Freezing cold. And what happened?
Well, Boris Johnson ended up in a fridge live on TV. It was quite a morning. I think we were still bleary-eyed, weren't we? And just very cold and thinking, what on earth are we doing here?
I can just remember it being so dark and me thinking, oh gosh, this is like so dark. It's 6 a.m.
Yeah.
We're in this pitch black farmyard somewhere. And then suddenly these TV cameras came on and Good Morning Britain were there to try and get this interview with Boris Johnson that he promised to do, but he didn't do. And so he went into the fridge. Also, there was a number 10 aide who was also caught off guard and accidentally swore on TV.
Live on TV.
So we got bundled on didn't quite realise what was happening.
Yeah.
I didn't quite clock. We saw him going in and out of the fridge, but you didn't quite clock that he'd hidden in the fridge and it was going to become this big story that people remember now. And we got bundled back on the bus. I remember looking on my phone and watching the live feed of Piers Morgan ranting on TV about what had happened. And so the poor number 10 aide got on the bus and obviously was getting loads of messages in the Tory campaign because he'd sworn on TV. And there's a bit of that story that people don't know, an added bit of how his day got even worse because at the dairy, they kindly gave us these pint bottles of milk that had milkshake inside, so chocolate milkshake. I think some of them were strawberry.
Yeah.
I think I had a strawberry one, and it was so cold. So we got on the bus. I wrapped it in my coat and put my coat above the seats on the coach, and we got off at the next stop, and I completely forgot that the milk was there. Pulled the coat out from there. The milk bottle came down. And the milkshake went all over the number 10 aide who had sworn on TV. And so by 7 a.m., or it might have been 8 a.m., by 8 a.m. in the morning, not only had he sworn on TV, Boris Johnson had hidden in a fridge in a total disaster, he had been absolutely soaked in milkshake. So a pretty disastrous day.
It was a terrible day. And I think, to be fair, I think it was a very nice coat he was wearing, so that's probably been ruined. I don't think it was solvable by a dry cleaner.
And you were who else were you on the battle? So Theresa May, Ed Miliband in 2015.
Yes, Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband is the one that sticks in my mind the most because it was my first one and I was on it for the whole of the campaign. So it really was kind of an endurance feat. I mean, it means I am part of a very special club, John. I can reveal this, that I'm probably one of only a dozen people, and to the day I die, I will be part of this very special club that nobody else will ever be able to join. I am one of the few people who has actually seen in person the Ed Stone.
Oh,
yeah.
I wonder what you were going to say then.
And it was one of those where you're slightly punch drunk because they kind of, I think they like to keep you punch drunk. They like to keep you tired and confused so you can't cause mischief. They want you to be always slightly, subpar. And so
you never know where in the country
you don't know. They don't tell you.
You're popping up in random constituencies. You're like, why are we here? Stopping at random schools.
Just trying to work out if you've got enough clothes and enough toothpaste to see you through the campaign. I didn't, but anyway, that's another story. And so I know all I can really remember is that I started the day leaving a hotel in Glasgow at 5 a.m. I ended up in Hastings, but between leaving the hotel at Glasgow at 5 a.m. and arriving in Hastings at something like 11 a.m., we stopped off somewhere, I can't remember where, to look at the Edstone. And it was one of those things where I was so tired and so confused. And I looked at it and I just thought, God, this is weird. But maybe this is what people do. And I was there with a photographer from the organisation I was working with, and he took loads of pictures. But weirdly, it was embargoed. So the Labour Party decided this was a really good story to give to a Sunday newspaper. And so they embargoed it. So the story in the pictures didn't appear for days. And then it was, so I'd completely forgotten about it and moved on with my life. And then, 2 or 3 days later, all of a sudden, all these pictures appear with Ed Miliband and the Edstone, and they just looked terrible. I mean, they looked terrible. And obviously, immediately, everyone then christened it the Edstone, and it became this just a source of mockery for Ed Miliband for the rest of the campaign. Now, for quite a long time afterwards, people were trying to find out what happened to this stone, and Labour would not tell anybody. It was taken off to some storage unit and locked up, so nobody could ever get any more pictures of it.
Into gravel.
I think that's
never
it.
to be seen
Eventually,
again.
they smashed it up, so nobody will ever see that great piece of manifesto promise
Political history
in life.
again.
Yeah. So the polls are pretty dire, but
Pretty dire is maybe an under-exaggeration, but
they're not good. They're not good, let's be honest. But there has been some good news for the Prime Minister this week, and actually it couldn't have come at a better time, really. Finally, inflation has hit the 2% target, which takes us back to where we were in normal times.
Where it should have been all the time, yeah.
Now, obviously, I would say, and we see from other countries in Europe, John, that the invasion of Ukraine was obviously largely to do with it and the problems with energy supplies. Obviously, the Prime Minister made it one of his 5 pledges to bring down inflation. And he'd already met that. He'd said he wanted to halve it. But obviously now it's back to what the Bank of England thinks is a good rate for inflation.
I think inflation coming down is clearly good news for people. It means that prices aren't going up as quickly as they were. But obviously, it still means prices aren't coming down. No. They're still really expensive. People are still struggling with their bills. Mortgages are still really high. I think that was one of the 5 promises he made at the start of last year. And it's basically the only one he's delivered. Because what were the others? Grow the economy. Is the economy growing?
Debt.
No. 0%. Flatlining. Bring down debt. Is that coming down? No. Waiting lists. He said he was going to cut NHS waiting lists. They were 7.3 million when he made that promise, and now 7.5 million. What were the other promises? Oh,
stop the boats.
Stop the boats.
Yeah.
And this week we saw over 800 people coming across the channel on one day, which is the biggest number in any single day, I think, in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So fine, he's made one of his pledges. But, he was a man who said, I've got this bold plan, I'm going to deliver. He had a plan and he had targets, and he's just not delivered on any of them apart from one.
The economy one, I think, is interesting because although it did flatline, the latest figures we saw did show it flatlining. That is just 1 month. And so last month, the Office for National Statistics, when they released figures on growth, they said the economy's going gangbusters. That was only a few weeks ago. So
I think he's later said that was a joke, that he wasn't. I mean, it's not going
well,
gangbusters, is it?
I mean,
0%.
That's a very odd joke for
I think it's an odd joke to make, but it doesn't seem to be borne out by the statistics.
Well, whatever. I think that was a foolish thing to do if he's saying that was a joke, because obviously all the newspapers then splashed on the economy's going gangbusters. But what we've seen,
some of the newspapers,
what we've seen is the economy is it's kind of up and down, isn't it? So it's not a straightforward increase.
Up
but
and down. It's basically just going on a flat line.
No, it's definitely on the up. It obviously dropped this month, but it has been
0.1% some months.
Yeah, but it's going in the right. It's going in the right. It's going in the right direction.
We're
it's
not
not going down.
recession.
Look, we're not in recession, and that is a good thing. So
congratulations to Rishi Sunak. Doing a great job.
Look, you have to grab these things where you can. So yes, I think on that, and then on the waiting list, obviously the government say, well, that is partly down to the fact that junior doctors and consultants.
It's always someone else to blame.
Well, I mean, you know,
he's set out the 5 pledges,
out,
he's not delivered on them, and it's someone else's fault.
If you have got junior doctors and consultants, obviously the consultants have now settled, but if you do have those people, the very core of the NHS, the people who actually do the work, walking out, then obviously you're not going to meet that. And there's not really a lot you can do about that when they're demanding 35% pay rises, which are obviously not something that even Labour says that it could afford. So I think it was a bit of a difficult one, that when clearly the British Medical Association has got some kind of political agenda there. John, this week, Keir Starmer took part in a radio phone-in where it was calls from listeners.
Yeah, on
and
LBC.
He said, he made this interesting kind of comment about how he would not raise taxes on working people. Now, that set hairs racing, that he would then go for savers. And I wrote that story, and Labour couldn't kind of come up with a way of saying that wasn't true. But it caused this whole kerfuffle about what is a working person.
He was slightly caught off guard by the question from Nick Ferrari on LBC, who said, well, what is a working person? He slightly hesitated, and I think he said, it's someone who's in work. It's someone who, if they might not be able to write a cheque to help someone out if they were short of money. Although I don't think there's many people left in the car. I couldn't write a cheque because I couldn't find my chequebook because I'm not sure I have one anymore. I don't think there's many. But I think it's just an example of politicians are so trained in what's the answer to different questions. How do you talk about for Keir, his 5 missions or the 6 first steps? And then sometimes the question just takes you by surprise and you struggle for a second to engage and think, well, how would I describe this? I mean, the answer they've given more recently is it's people who get their earnings from work rather than people who are kind of living off of trust funds or millionaires in massive houses.
But that's just people, isn't it? I mean, how many people live off trust funds?
Well, not many. That's why. But that's
it's
why. I mean, it is maybe a strange term to use, but I think it's just them saying most ordinary voters aren't going to be impacted. It is just going to be if you are some of those privileged in society.
I think it's odd to me because obviously the Labour Party traditionally is the party of the working class, but he cannot bring himself to use that phrase, working class.
You accuse him of class war if he did that.
Well, there is that. You know, that is fair. But I mean, the phrase working people, is that... It just is confusing to people because if you are talking about everybody apart from probably 100,000 Trustafarians, then that is quite a weird. You're just talking about the country. You're just talking about the people, aren't you? So it was really confusing. I think also when one of my team was with Keir Starmer yesterday and said, "Are you a working person?" and he kind of looks a bit. And then he did answer, yes, I am a working person. I mean, that just is everybody apart from people who are retired.
Non-doms who are kind of living.
Well, non-doms are already leaving the country, John. So there's not going to be any of them left, are there?
What a shame. Bye.
Bye to all the rich people who have money to spend. It's terrible. I think what it does, though, actually send a signal to is retired people, pensioners. Are they going to tax pensions?
No.
Well, then they're not matching the triple lock plus, which means that anybody on a state pension who will be dragged into income tax for the first time, that is going to happen. But also they haven't ruled out taxing the relief on pension savings. So when you were talking about ordinary working people, and if you then explain that means basically everybody in the country, then you are having to look at other groups, aren't you? So that could include pensioners. So, John, what's your moment of the week?
My moment of the week is a party election broadcast by the Tory party. And there was an evening this week where things wrapped up a bit earlier than normal. I met a friend for a drink in a pub. And in the corner of the pub, there was a news channel on mute. And it came up, party election broadcast on the Tory party. And then I just watched it, and it was Laura Trott, who is Chief Secretary to the Treasury, giving a press conference that was last week, just being played. And I thought, I must have misunderstood this. There must be more to the election broadcast than just them playing a press conference from last week. And then I got home and I watched it back, and that literally was it. That was the election broadcast. It was some fake news music and then just a replay of a press conference she gave last week. And it just felt like, have they given up? Well, I actually tweeted and said, have the Tories either given up or run out of money? And someone in the Tory party actually sent me a WhatsApp and said we have run out of money.
Yeah.
That they cannot afford to do the big productions that we used to from the Tory party. You spend loads of money on this because this is your chance. And we are at the point in the election where postal votes are going out. Loads of people will be voting before election day. And I was speaking to some people in Labour HQ yesterday, and they were saying they have been preparing for the fight of their lives this campaign, because they just thought the Tories will pull out any trick they can. And so far, it just doesn't even feel like they're trying anymore.
I think that they're fighting Labour on one side, they're fighting Reform on the other, and they're fighting the Lib Dems. So they've got three very
fronts. Limp punches in all directions.
Well, they're just spread so thinly. It is very, very difficult for them. Labour only have to beat the Tories, don't they? But the Tories are trying to hold on to those bits of the blue wall that are potentially going to turn yellow. They're trying to see off the threat from Reform that, even though they might not win many seats, if any, will just cut away at all their votes. And then obviously the main opposition, which is Labour. So I think it's very difficult to fight on three fronts, and it does mean they are spread quite thinly. But anyway, I mean, I just thought, well, wheeling out Gary Neville, that was an interesting. Let's go to the Lake District for a bit of a bromance with Gary Neville.
What's wrong with that?
Well, I don't know. I don't really know about football, neither do you.
No, yeah, that's one thing we can agree on.
But, I don't know, is he as admired by all sides as people in Manchester? I don't know.
I mean, you've got the comparison. Do you have a election broadcast which is just a press conference of Laura Trott, that big star, well-known household name, Laura Trott? Or do you have Gary Neville? And yeah, he is a celebrity, but he was talking to Keir Starmer about what are you going to do about the country? How would your parents feel if they were still here? There are plenty of people who don't engage in politics all the time. And if there's something that just makes them think, well, I will stop and listen to this guy, and it's Gary Neville, I think, so be it.
Gary Neville, Labour's gained one retired footballer / ex-pundit for the Qatari state-run channel. It's also lost the greatest snooker player of all time, still at the very top of his game, Ronnie O'Sullivan. He is backing
Faisal Shaheen.
Yeah, so he's gone far to the left. But speaking of battle buses, which we were earlier, I remember in 2015 on the Ed Miliband, which is emblazoned on my brain, as you can tell, we did stop off at an event where Ronnie O'Sullivan did turn up to endorse Ed Miliband. He also played snooker with Ed, but sadly I wasn't invited to that one. But anyway,
there hasn't actually been that many celebrities in this campaign.
There hasn't,
although I'm not
compared
sure,
to previous years.
I'm not sure if I should say this, but there was actually meant to be a celebrity involved in the Labour campaign this week, because we were meant to interview them, but they got an injury, and so they had to pull out from being part of the campaign. But I'm not sure whether I should
John,
said
I'm
that.
intrigued.
Spilling the secrets. But anyway, I won't say who it was. And
Did he happen to fall off a stage?
Oh, no, it wasn't him.
Oh, okay,
I can start that rumour, but
okay.
no, it wasn't.
Well, I'll stop the guessing game. We could be here all day.
And that may have been a bit too obvious. What is your moment of the week?
So my moment of the week is Jovan Owusu-Nepal, who is the Labour candidate in Clacton. There's a great picture of him and Nigel Farage bumping into each other out on the campaign trail, having a bit of a laugh. And he has been dubbed the most stylish politician in Britain because he wears all these very dapper suits, he wears these great colourful jumpers, he really takes pride in his appearance. And I'm very pro politicians making a bit of effort with their appearance, because sadly in Parliament too many don't bother. I think that think now that the rules have been loosened in the Commons Chamber and you can go in tieless, I think that is a sad state, John.
I'm sorry to have...
You've let me down with your tireless appearance, but also I think it's quite difficult, isn't it? The fashion side of it for politicians. You don't want to look. Theresa May obviously famously got into trouble for wearing expensive trousers. I think,
to be fair, she had borrowed.
She didn't even own them, but she was torn apart for that. I'm old enough to remember Andy Burnham being in Parliament, being a very sharp-suited, fancy lunch-eating young thruster before he had his make under and became an anorak-wearing king of the north. So, you can use clothes, can't you, to kind of send a message to voters. I think that's quite interesting. I think the problem for women is a man can just put on a suit and a tie and look very smart, great. For women, you kind of get a lot of them get trapped in wearing party colours now. Obviously, I'm wearing red today. It does not reflect my political philosophy, but it is.
But you defected as well. you know the way the wind's going.
If the express falls. But I think I would just send this bit of advice to any woman entering Parliament for the first time. You don't have to wear your party colours. And I would just say particularly yellow is a very difficult colour to pull off.
Right, we'll be back on Tuesday with a new episode. Email us if you've got any questions, thedivisionbell@reachplc.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. We'll see you then.
Bye. Thank you for listening. This is a Reach Studio production hosted by myself, Sam Lister and John Stevens. Produced and edited by Lydia O'Malley, Shabir Nurzai. Our researcher is Sheila Mahmoodi and design and art direction by Curtis Phillips Cozier and Luke Stidson. Audio managed by Matt Millard and social content managed by Gully Burrows and Ed Washington. Content production and design overseen by Yara Silver, Harry Dumanel and Spencer Robotham.